Hello and welcome everyone. So in our previous tutorial we have seen how you can set up an Angular application and get started by creating your first Angular application. So in this tutorial what we are going to do is we are going to learn how you can create your first Angular application as shown on angular.io. As the steps we followed begin with getting started and then going to your first step. Now on the website, how you can create the application and get started with your first project. This is not listed as accurately as it should be in order to explain newcomers how they can create their first application. So to make it easy, I would be explaining you guys how we can follow the steps to create an exact application, what they have on their StackBliz account. So we have our reference application, and in this application if you see this, there are some styles and icons which are not there by default. We need to install few libraries and have some custom CSS which they have on their StackBliz project. We won't be focusing much on CSS right now. I would be explaining you guys how you can create your component structure and the components inside it for the use in the application most appropriately, right? So let's start by running our application as we did before. Go to the project folder and run ng-serve -o. This will serve the application as well as open the browser once the application is compiled. So our application has compiled successfully and it's up and running. So let's first begin by creating the components in our application. So all your code related to your Angular application goes to the src folder of your project. Inside this, app is the main root, what we can say, starting point of your application, and app.component is the first component that gets loaded in your application. So you can also see over here in your app.modules, the bootstrap is an informative property which tells this module that which component should start when the application runs. Alright, so I would also show you how this application is starting and what nested structure is it following. So let's first see that and then we'll move ahead. So this is the starting point of your application, which is app root. App component which you see has a style tag which informs the DOM what is the component selector. Alright, so this @component decorative can be broken into three main parts, which is selector. It is like the div or the elements that we have. So this entire component is an element of its own. We are creating our own custom elements, and this can be targeted using this selector. So for example, if I have to call this in some component, I would be using the tag like this, app-root, alright, and a closing tag. So this will call the component using its selector. Alright, the second thing is the template URL. It will contain the HTML for this component. You can also write your own HTML without using a file separately. The selector for it is template. Using this you can write your own HTML over here. Alright, for example, let me show you. Alright, so these are the changes which are visible instantly. I'm reverting it back so that we can use the proper semantics of the application. And this is the style URLs property. This is an array which can have multiple CSS, SCSS files. So these are getting selected from here. Alright, this is the path of the file and we are targeting those files and providing them over here. This is a property of app component. Alright, this is a class which is exported so that we can import it inside our app.modules. This property is used over there in our app.component.html. Let's search for it. Alright, let's use string interpolation. This is the way in which you can use properties of class in the HTML. So here it is. It says that title, which will be replaced by the actual string that we have in our component, is running. Alright, so let's check it out. Here it is. My app is running. So the actual value of that property is replaced in the browser and we can see the results. Alright, I'm closing this now. So this is the way in which app root works. An app component is created. The two other components which we'll be having in our app root are app toolbar and the product list. Alright, these will be two separate components. We'll be taking help of their examples so that you can later on use these examples as a reference and practice them on your own as well. Alright, so let's follow their approach and see how they have created two packages. One is the top bar and another is the product list. So before we begin, let me tell you that there are two ways in which you can create a component. First is using Angular CLI. Alright, let me show you how we do that. There is a command called ng generate component or nggc for short and the component name. So this will create a component with following four files. The first is the TypeScript file, which is the file containing class file of the component. Second is the CSS file, which will be containing the styles of the component. Third is the HTML files, which would be containing HTML of the component. And fourth is the spec.ts file, which would be containing test related code for your component. Okay. Fifth file, which is index.ts, is a file that can be created in order to create modules of multiple components and then exporting a selected set of those modules or features of your application to some another module. This is related to performance orientation and creating chunks of your application so that the application performance increases. This is something which is related to advanced topics and we will be discussing it later on in our advanced projects. But for beginning, I think this information is more than enough and let's begin with it. So first of all, I would be letting you guys know how you can create a component on your own without using the Angular CLI so that you can understand the deeper concepts of it. Let's first start by creating the top bar. So in my app folder, I would be creating a new folder called top bar. Then I will be creating three files for this top bar component. First is the top bar .component.ts. Second file which I would be creating is top bar component.css. Third file I would be creating is top bar component.html. Alright, so now these are three empty files which do nothing right now. There is no effect in the application until we write the actual logic and then use it. Alright, so let's start by creating the component. So for creating a component, you need to import component from @Angular core. Alright, then we need to create an export class with caps in the letters for the name of component, and there is a naming convention of using component in the end of the component name. Then above this class we need to use the component decorator that we imported from @Angular core. Then first of all we'll be describing our selector. Selector name we would be using is app-top-bar. Alright, then the template URL that we have over here is / and what we can see is top-bar.component.html. Alright, this is the HTML file that would be loading. Then we have styles URLs for being precise, and then this is an array. Inside this array we have only one CSS file, so let's use it, top-bar.component.css. So this is the way in which we create a component. Alright, And now how we can use this component in our application. For example, as shown on the official website's example, if we see they have this component written and called over here using the selector of the application. But if I show you guys directly by writing this selector over here in our app.component.html file, let's first remove all this code which they have there by default, and let's start by writing our own code from scratch. So if we see now, it's all empty. And now let me call the selector of our component that we have created right now, and it will give us an error. Alright, so this is the error. It states that error in src/app/app.component.html files, app-top-bar is not a known element. Alright, so if you guys remember, in my previous tutorial I have shown you guys how this app.module.ts file is responsible for letting the application know that which component it should load and which it should not load. So before using the app-top-bar component, we need to import it in our Angular application. So we can import it using the import, and then let's import it from the file path that we have, top bar, and then only one file needs to be imported, that's app.component. Alright, and we can see that it's giving us top bar component, and this as well will not allow us to use that component. We have 4 major things which need the declaration of files and modules that we are going to use in our application. So right now what we have is a component, and components go into declaration parts of the module, modules go into import part, and providers is for services and other related global services and modules, and bootstrap is the part of application which component should be loaded at the time of loading of application. So let's add the top bar component in our declarations, and let's see what happens. So our error here is resolved, and as far as we see, there is nothing. And now let's write something to see if the top bar is working or not. So our top bar is coming up right. One more thing that we have missed is in deleting all the code, we have deleted our router outlet as well. So let's first add that over here. Let's check out if there are any errors. There are no errors, so things are working perfectly fine. Now this is the first way in which we are creating a component, and there is another way which, as discussed, we will be using now using the Angular CLI. So let me show you the other way around. First of all, we have to stop the execution of our project. Alright, so if we check out now, our project won't be working. That's fine. Let's go to the command line. Here we will be writing the command that is ng generate component, or nggc for short, and then the component name. So component name here is product f1 list, and we won't be using the test scripts for now, so we would be skipping it using --skip -test. This will create a component under the app folder with the name of product list and all the necessary files, CSS, HTML, and product component as we have created it in a custom way. On init is a lifecycle hook that informs the component when the component has been initialized perfectly fine, and we'll be discussing more about the lifecycle hooks later on, but for now you can ignore it and continue with the work as we are doing right now. Let's check the app.module.ts file. Here also the component has been declared already using the command line. So these are automated things that you can use when you are using this framework in your day-to-day work. And the way in which I have shown you how you can create it using your custom method is because you should know the basics of the application that you are using. Alright, so that you can debug it at the later point of time. Suppose if you need 2-3 css files, you can easily add them in this array, or if you need to switch your html file, you can do it over here. So these are few informative things that would help you out in long-term development. Alright, so let's now test our product list component as well and see how we are using it. Let's copy the selector and go to our app top bar. We'll be using it with the router, but let's test it first and start our application as we have already stopped it. Alright, so as you can see, the application is working fine. Top bar is there, product list work, but still the UI isn't the same what we have over here. So we'll be working on that next, and let's start with the further steps. So what we are going to do next is we won't be using a product list over here directly. Only the top bar is a constant thing, remaining routes would be moving. So we are using this router outlet selector in our application. Router outlet belongs to routing module which we have in our Angular using Angular router, and there are two important things that we need to import from it. First is the router module. Router module informs the Angular application that it is using routing, and what kind of routes it uses, we are providing it using the routes. Alright, so this is the basic structure which is needed for routing, and I will be showing you guys how you can use router outlet to load the product list component. So this must not work now over here if we save our HTML file. Alright, so there is no product list, and now we will be loading a product list using app routing configuration. So let's first import the component that we need to load. So let's import product list component. Alright, so product list component. In the routes array, what we are going to do is we are going to create an object with a path of nothing, which means that the default path, it would be empty, and the component that we need to load on this path is the product list component. So now if the application runs, it loads the product list component as it was loading it before without our specification of app product list selector over here. So this is the way in which we create our components and how we can call the different components using selector and router outlets. This information is not provided on your first application angular.io getting started project, and I think this is better to understand before we begin with the actual development. They also have this structure which I also have drawn over here, and I will be showing you guys how this structure is important in understanding the architecture of application. So as you can see, they have this app top bar, app product list, and app root. Similarly, as we see over here, we have created application root using an app.component, then the application toolbar and the product list. So if we go to inspection of a page, let's see how the application is created. So if we see the upper level architecture of application, under the body tag of our application there is app root, as we have seen over here. Then there is app toolbar, which is over here. Let me show you guys that this is the actual toolbar. So instead of selecting our main component, let's select the h1 tag and let's see if the background color changes. Okay, I think that's fine for understanding. This is our app toolbar, and the router outlet is rendering this component over here, which is our product list component, and let's color this as well. Alright, so this is the structure which our application is following. This is important to understand before we start with the actual development of the application. So keep following the tutorial guys, and let's see you in the next lecture. If you guys are interested in following more and learning more about me, then do visit my GitHub profile. github.com/Tawfiq Kadri. And if you are interested in connecting with me, you can connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/Tawfiq Kadri. I would be happy to help you guys. You can connect with me, learn more about the things I've done, and follow my blog tutorials, which is blog.developershype.com. You guys can search for it. There are more tutorials on Node.js, Express.js, and React.js apart from Angular. If you are interested, you can learn more about it. So keep following, guys, and see you in the next lecture.